Hi, I am Jackson, and my story is The Sphinx's Gem. In a small town called Baldwin City lives a boy named Steve. When he was young, he was trapped in a fire and inhaled a lot of smoke. It damaged his vocal cords and he could no longer speak. Steve is now 9 years old and goes to Creek Elementary. Steve wants to be an inventor and is always creating new tools for his dad, who is an archaeologist and travels out of the country looking for fossils. When Steve's dad, Ryan, was digging for bones in Uganda, he found a turquoise gemstone. He went back home and gave the stone to Steve as a gift. Steve studied the stone and couldn't find much information about it except in one of his dad's old Egyptian scrolls. It mentioned a powerful blue-green stone. One day, while Steve was working on a new backpack for his dad, he accidentally dropped his new stone into the sink and it got wet. It started to shake around and float up in the air. It floated towards his face, and a beam of light shot towards his throat, and then it fell. He started to yell when he realized he could speak again. Steve went to get his dad and tell him what happened. He was starting to think that his new gem had more powers than he realized. The next day at school, Steve saw a poster that had information about a science fair. He decided to enter the fair. When Steve got home from school, he went to his invention lab in his backyard and started working on a new invention. He wanted to create a bone detector to help his dad find fossils. It looked like a radio with a dial that moved back and forth. The idea is like a metal detector, but it detects bones. Steve decided to try to place the gemstone he had in a battery-type case inside his radio to see if it would power the machine. He hooked all the wires up to the battery case and turned it on. The power showed it was charging. Steve was excited the stone was the power source. He took the stone out of the radio for safekeeping and saw that the radio was still showing a charge. He realized that he could use the gem as a power source to all of his inventions if he built a charging case for each one. The next week, while Steve went to the science fair and explained his invention, how it worked and how it would help archaeologists, the judges voted and Steve won first prize. Steve's dad was so excited and wanted to try out Steve's invention. Ryan asked Steve if he wanted to go to Egypt and bone hunt near the Great Sphinx of Giza. So they packed up and took a plane to Egypt. Once they got there, they rented some camels and headed out to the desert. They traveled to the Great Sphinx. They set up a camp and waited until morning to get started. The next morning, they began to climb the Great Sphinx to look for hieroglyphics. They climbed the front legs up towards the neck. Steve then saw an indentation on the Sphinx's neck that looked like it would fit his gemstone. He took his gem out of his backpack and placed it in the hole. All of a sudden, bones started flying out of the ground and circling the Sphinx. They started slowly floating down towards the Sphinx. Then the bones went through the stone to form the skeleton of the Sphinx, and it stood up. The ancient stone Sphinx had come alive, the stone turning into fur and skin. Its eyes turned red, and Steve and his dad backed away quickly. The Sphinx began speaking. It said that if Steve and Ryan could answer its question, it would go back to sleep. If not, they would have to follow him to the afterworld. The Great Sphinx asked them a riddle. What flies through the air, peaks at dawn, peaks at noon, and hides at dusk? Steve and his dad looked at each other and began thinking. After a few minutes, they formed an idea. They told the Sphinx that it was the sun. The Sphinx spoke to them one last time. He told them that they were right. The Sphinx began to glow and spirits began to rise out of its body. The Sphinx turned back to stone, and Steve and his dad were left in the sand shaking. Suddenly, a light flashed, and before they could see what happened, they were back in their home. They were left confused. Steve no longer had the stone, but at least he still had his dad and his inventions. The end.